System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. I am Amin TMK alongside Emoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Hello, Emoja. Happy Tuesday. How are you?
Man, we out here getting it, watching all these deals, man. Deals
to be done. So let's dive. Are there deals? We'll see what happens. So let's discuss a little bit about what's going on in between the United States and Russia in terms of the Ukraine war, which again is always just interesting to me, like why it's the United States and Russia having this conversation, if in fact was sort of the desire of the Ukrainian people to go into this war. But that's for another conversation. And it's looking more and more as a step away from the Ukrainian conflict. There has been obviously a pushback from the people who are tied to this conflict. Obviously, the Zelensky's number one, but we can talk about van der Leyen, and we can also talk about Ken Starmer, who released a little letter basically saying, no matter what, we're willing and ready to send troops into Ukraine. So lots of things going on. What was your take sort of on this scuttlebutt? Do you think that it's real? And, you know, what do you make of the state of the Russia-Ukraine negotiations?
There was something you said earlier, you know, talking about, you know, why is it the United States and Russia, you know, why isn't it, you know, Ukraine? And it really, it goes to the point of this. Ukraine has been a, let's be nice and say, fledgling democracy since the 90s. They've had several presidents. There's only one president that ever had physical conflict with the Russians, and it's the new one, Zelensky. It's not that the terms were worse under Zelensky than they've been for anybody else. Zelensky has chosen to engage in a military conflict with Russia. That's where Russia is. Russia's answer is we don't even know if it's the will of the Ukrainian people to have war with us. Why don't we have an election? See if Ukraine picks another person and see if that person also wants to be at war with us, right? It's something you can miss in all of this. The only president in the history of Ukraine to have a military conflict with Russia is Zelensky. And Zelensky's the one that has continued to keep this martial law in place, talking about, you know, well, the Russians would like it, you know, if I rescinded it. Yeah, I don't think the Russians really give a fuck about. I think it's the average Ukrainian that would like to have those draconian laws pulled off. I mean, look, man, this is what I don't get about all the leftists that claim to be pro-Ukraine. How can you justify people that are bus drivers, people that are gardeners getting grabbed off the street? And don't tell me it don't happen. I've seen too many of the videos. Getting grabbed up off the street, drafted, put through some 2 to 3 week military boot camp and sent to die, certain death. How can you claim to be pro-Ukraine when that's what's happening? Like, I can't think of a single civilization that I would be okay with people that have not chosen to be in the military, right? Being forced out of whatever your way of life is, or it's a literal crime. You know, that's not democracy. You know, I mean, there's a country that does that. Their name is Israel. You know, but even Israel, it's like, it's at least part of the social contract. You know that when you turn this age, you join in the military, right? Like South Korea, pretty much the same thing. What Ukraine is doing, no one else is doing that in the world. I don't think the Americans were doing that in the Vietnam War. I mean, grabbing people off the street and shipping them off, forcing prisoners. They claim every accusation is confession, right? Come to find out, it was the Ukrainians putting prisoners out there and forcing them to go into war, like the new Sardaukar, you know? So like, you know, they're right. I will also say, though, Some things that are quite fascinating to me is the change in the tone of the American government now as it does business compared to where we were 4 months ago. There's no way Blinken would have met with Lavrov, right? Even though that's his job. America's not at war with Russia, not officially. So why can America's chief diplomat not meet with Russia's chief diplomat? That's your job. It's your job more than the president, actually. Like, it makes way more sense for the Secretary of State to deal with the foreign minister of Russia than the American president to deal with the Russian premier or president, or even, whether you're talking about the, what's the other thing they have? They have the president, and then they have I can't fucking remember, the prime minister, right? Right? No, the American diplomat should speak to the Russian diplomat, and that's happening. Now, there's some curious things that are happening, right? We got Zelensky off in the UAE right now. He wasn't invited, right? And petulantly, right, it looks like he goes to UAE just to be close. And he's going to meet with the Saudis the day after the deal is made. He's already on record saying that Ukraine will not recognize the United States-Russia talks, as if he has a freaking choice. Because who are you buying the weapons from, and who are you beholden to? Without American support, Zelensky disappears in 60 days. That's just a fact. The only reason he's alive is because the Americans and the Russians allow him to be so. And I'm sorry that sounds like harsh language, but that's statecraft. Zelensky has no place here. He does what he's told. But he is in UAE, and this is funny because everybody that moves money, they know. The Emirates are where you go to move money now. Everybody's talking about doing audits. He's talking about it's 100 billion missing, Then he shows up in UAE. Once we know that the war is about to be over, homeboy is setting up a nest egg, and that is just undeniable. That's what he's there for. He's in UAE to launder billions of dollars to make sure that he lands softly, him and the people that he has to take care of, because he knows it's over. Him being in UAE is as much a guarantee that is, and the Russians have said straight up, there's two things off the rip. One, they're not going to deal with Zelensky because they don't see him as the legitimate president because his term has expired. Term limit is expired. Even when people still call him President Zelensky, that's technically not true. He's president by fiat, and he's the one that's maintaining that fiat. That's the martial law. And the second thing that they said, and I found this to be quite interesting, considering where they're meeting. The Russians have said these meetings have nothing to do with Iran, right? What we've been telling you over and over on Inner City Left. The Americans are trying to get out of Ukraine to prepare themselves for the Iran war. Russia and Iran have a strategic partnership. We don't quite know the limit to what that is, but it's important to say, I think they're beholden to Iran, and I think they recognize that in a very real way. When the West was giving all of their best military technology to the Ukrainians, what turned the tide for the Russians was the Iranian military tech that they got. It reimagined contemporary warfare with drones in such a totally different way than the Westerners practiced drone warfare. And I think in no small part, Russia would not have been able to have the success they had in Ukraine were it not for the support of the Iranians. And so I think setting that out early as a marker, like whatever else happens here, we're not here to talk about Iran. I think those are two strong positions.
It's an economic tie as well. You're asking me to betray this for something that I've already obtained through the blood and of my own troops, my own people, by you? No, I'm like, okay on that. And look, I get that talks are open and hey, that's awesome. I'm here for that. I don't want any situation where we're not discussing something with a country like Russia because that country is not going anywhere. And we're going to have to deal with them whether you want to or not. That's just the reality of the global economic, military, socioeconomic situation.
Inner City Left, man. I mean, I came from the streets, and if we not talking, we shooting. So I'm always happy when we can talk a little bit. Let's talk about the ways that maybe
Sometimes you're talking and shooting, but when you're talking and shooting, maybe the shooting is a little less, or there's some rules surrounding the shooting. That's sort of the nature of this. Yeah. And we always say like geopolitics is gangster shit. And if you're really not interested in that narrative, what is your relationship with force, which is another aspect.
You'll never understand why these things happen, right?
This is just what goes down.
It's power. Geopolitics is about power.
I think because, let me ask you this. So I just want to you said a lot, and I just want to kind of double back on some things. You are seeing Ken Starmer. He released this note or whatever, okay? And because so much of, what we're witnessing in Europe, I think, is the remnants of the Blinkenification of Europe. And so many of the leaders, Ken Starmer, I think, is absolutely like at the top of that list as sort of remnants of the Blinkenification. It was literally out here saying that they are ready to put British troops on the ground. I know you already talked about this as a security guarantee for potential future deal with Russia. He says, I do not say that lightly. I feel very deeply the responsibility that comes with potentially putting British servicemen and women in harm's way. But yeah, and let me just throw this in here because you can address both of them. Van der Leyen, okay. She's basically out here talking to General Kellogg, talking about, this, basically that they're not taking sort of this Trump approach of, it ending in Ukraine. And they're really kind of the only politicians out there in Europe that are really pushing this. Macron has even kind of take a step away. What does this mean for Europe? And what do you think happens with sort of the blinkified politicians that remain in Europe?
Right. So connecting them to Blinken, I think Blinken was just good connective tissue. They're going to do what the American empire tells them to do, especially when it's in relation to the propaganda that best suits their needs. But now that Blinken is gone, they've lost that connective tissue. And so now they're having to come up with their own reasons. And each nation, right, we act like it's one big happy EU, right? That's a mythology. Each of these countries have their own motivations. Germany and Russia have historically just had problems. They went to 2 world wars about it. You know what I'm saying? But the British are a different thing, right? The British are still in denial about the collapse of their empire and their military might. They still live in this world where they believe that British might is second only to the Americans. And that's just not fucking true, right? In British history, and this is where history starts to hurt you, the British kids are taught that they won the Crimean War. I guess you can say they did, which was a 19th century war between Russia and Britain. They've always seen Russia as somewhat backwards, like your backward cousin. They don't see that the Russian culture is a culture of like physical prowess. I mean, look at how many incredible UFC fighters come from Russia. Right? We're not even just talking about like the Dagestanis, all over Russia. They're known for being tough, strong men. British culture is not that, and so you have people like Keir Starmer, right, who obviously have their own issues with Trump, saying that they're going to put 12,000 men in, and that sounds impressive, right? And so you remember that 60,000 Ukrainians died last month. So what the fuck is 12,000? What is that? They think that being British and being NATO will protect them. And Russia has said in every way they know how, they don't give a fuck about that. Like, if you step on the field, we will kill you. You know what I'm saying? They've killed the sneaky little British mercenaries that have come out. In fact, the thing is, what I'm hearing is in places like Kursk, where it's going all bad, when they're surrendering, the Ukrainians are throwing their hands up and yelling, we're Ukrainian, because they know that the Russians will just kill the mercenaries. They're not even taking them because you don't have to. I don't have to afford you the protections of the rules of war because you're not a stated soldier aligned with another nation. There are rules to war that change. This is why mercenaries get paid them big bucks, because you are not protected. It's never the mercenaries that are, when you see these prisoner swaps and whatnot, that don't happen. You signed up for it and you know what it is. So that should tell you about that. And that goes to the other thing. Remember when I said the British see the Russians as a little bit backwards, a little bit slow? They look at Ukrainians like slow Russians. So if they think Russians are slow, right? And so that's where you are now. The reason why the British are talking about taking the battlefield is because they wrongly believe the reason that they're losing is because the Ukrainians just aren't smart enough. They're just not tough enough to beat the Russians. And if a couple of British men, you know what I'm saying? It's on some real Leonidas shit. And the fact of the matter is, the Ukrainian soldiers are much better trained, much more salted, a more blooded army than the British. If the British if the British fielded 100,000 men, they'd lose 30,000 in 2 months. That's just a fact. They're not ready for this kind of a war. The British are used to, really special forces. You drop in, you kill a couple of insurgents, you get the fuck out. That's what their military is geared for now. It's not geared for, that World War II shit where we got 80,000 men in the field. We got logistics lines. We got tanks. We got mechanics for tanks. You see what I'm saying? Like real war is a real thing. And the British don't know nothing about real war. They really don't. The last real action the British saw was in the Iraq War, which was just in a very supporting role for the Americans and in very specific areas. That's why you saw videos of what was it? Prince William, wearing his Marine suit out there on the helicopter. They doing photo op war. They don't know what the fuck it is to be down there in the mud, literally digging trenches. You got fiber optic FPV drones flying over night and day. You under constant artillery fire. It's raining. It's snowing. You know what I'm saying? Thermobaric weapon. They don't know nothing about that.
I want to, because you've been hinting at this and you talked to us a little bit about this. Let's zoom out of Europe. Obviously, I think everyone knows that Europe is on the decline big time. And in some ways, I mean, for the Americans, again, they're just there to be exploited and do the will of, the American deep state or whatever you'd like to call it. But there's sort of been this idea, and maybe the rhetoric also fits this, that the Trump administration wants to get that money out of Ukraine, get those weapon deliveries out of Ukraine so they can focus in, obviously, Israel is one of those. They also have a tremendous amount of rhetoric that points to a conflict with Iran, and also the the Taiwanese, or I don't want to say the Taiwanese, with that particular party, which won again, the separatists. I think that's the best way to call them. Do you see that to be true? As we move forward here.
Well, this is one thing I would say: there ain't no getting shit back. You're not getting money back. You're not getting weapons back. What you can do is cut it off. Cold turkey.
Stopping the bleeding.
You're not getting no more. We're not giving you no more money. We're not giving you no. But getting weapons back, that's a dead fucking mission, man.
Right. They're not getting weapons back for sure.
Who knows where those weapons are, man? I mean, that's the thing that the Republicans are saying now. It's like the Ukrainians are so corrupt. They've been selling these weapons all over the world. Some of these weapons are showing up in the Mexican cartels. I mean, even Claudia Sheinbaum is like, where are these military grade weapons? We don't make these weapons in Mexico. Why are these weapons in Mexico?
That's why that's why you see some of these. What are the Azov Brigade doing in Somalia and Sudan?
Right.
Why would they need to be there? Shouldn't they be fighting for their own country?
Yeah, you'd think they'd be doing better. Y'all supposed to be the best little Nazi soldiers. Yeah, but real things are happening. Real things are happening. And everything we talk about, I'm sorry, we talk about great game politics on Inner City Left because that's what you need. You talk about zooming out. That is the scope. And it's little bitty things. America kills you with the death of 1,000 cuts. Like, for example, since the Trump administration, the United States has they've upgraded their United States fact sheet, on Taiwan, right? The United States has fact sheets on all of these countries and regions all over the world, just so you know what the official American policy is. And the American government official policy is that there is one China, and that China is the Communist Party of China in Beijing, right? They've cut and sliced and diced. And so now the new fact sheet, it's the same as it was under Biden, except they've removed one line. And that line is that the United States does not support Taiwan independence. Now, it doesn't say the United States does support Taiwanese independence, but that's been part of the United States fact book on Taiwan for the past, 30 years or so. So removing a line like that, you can see becomes a little bit of a motivator, like jump, declaring the United States doesn't oppose you, And so, it's those kind of ways. And of course, the Chinese delegation has had a huge, response to this. They've said that's the first red line that must not be crossed. But every American president plays with this a little bit more, plays with it a little bit more, gets a little bit cuter. And the reality is, in the United States right now, where we can't even guarantee commercial planes, why would we feel confident going to war with the premier manufacturing company in the world, with technology leads in most important areas or second only to the United States in the areas where they're not first? Now's not the time. And that's what they're doing.
And there's no time in the future, and that's the whole point, right? This is the best it's ever going to be. And instead of saying, you know what, this is an impossibility,
we need
need to take a step back from this idea of American hegemony, unipolarity.
Unipolarity.
We need to step away from this, and we need to at least focus on your region. I mean, I'm not even saying that.
Can we land some planes safely just this month, please?
No. No.
Planes doing pirouettes and shit in the United States,
you guys.
No one died, man.
You guys threatening tariffs on everybody and then not following through. You guys, USAID basically exposing the entire,
the
Oppenheimer industrial complex, right? Exactly. Mind you, nothing's changed for us. I just want to say we're not funded by USAID. You don't got to look up nothing. We're funded by our patrons.
Man.
And the homies, but yeah, I mean, the United States is again, worried about the wrong things. And again, I think you start to see domestically, the United States just, again, further descending into a crumbling empire and doing the same things that crumbling empires always do. This sort of idea that they're going to flail their way back into, prominence, and that's just not going to happen.
I find it ironic that the reason why the Americans are not able to protect their hegemony for a much longer period of time is just simply the greed of the billionaire class. If they would have kept manufacturing in the United States, America would still be a leading manufacturer. If you are going to be an industrial manufacturing power, you can have a lot of war because you can build things. You can build tanks, you can build planes, you can build ships. When you don't build those things, you can't be there's no level of technological superiority you can maintain, which will allow someone that can outcompete you as far as production. And we learned that in World War II. The Germans had the best tanks in the world. The Russian tanks were shit, but there was 10 Russian tanks for every German panzer. Guess who won? And that math hasn't changed. And,
Do you have Megatron?
Right.
If you don't got Megatron, you're going to need a fleet of
and
these.
The technological gap between Chinese military tech and American military tech is not nearly so big as German military tech and Soviet military tech in the 40s. I mean, there were generational gaps, man, between those. Now it's just it's how you slice it, man. I mean, America technically has better stealth. China technically has better radars. I mean, that's a cat and mouse game. You know, Russia's got the best surface-to-area missiles and the best missiles, unless Iran has. You see what I'm saying? Like, but it used to be in the 90s, America had the best everything. They had the best ships. They had the best planes. They had the best tanks.
And everybody was a bit reeling. You know, like I feel like people also were politically reeling. You know, Russia was politically reeling in the 90s. You know, China still, you know.
China's trying to find its footing in the 90s. I mean,
you know.
It was about equal to India. You know, now they dwarf.
Even Iran, you know, Iran has it's a different game, you know, and then I'm not to say the United States does not have wins, you know, general president and, you know, the king with the British accent and, you know, so on and so forth. But I mean, we don't even know how long that's going to last.
Right.
So this will be kind of like, I think the last point here, but you know, is this thing with Iran? I mean, you already have obviously Benjamin Netanyahu's rhetoric is always at 11 when it comes to Iran. What is the future here?
This is the thing. And I'm seeing a thing happen. Again, words, right? Who knows what words are? If words won wars, Erdogan would have, you know, the Ottoman Empire. Because don't nobody talk as tough as that boy, you know? But words do matter, right? And I'm starting to see words from people that I never hear words from. Like, I've been hearing so much chatter about, like, Egyptian government people talking about how far Israel has taken this, right? The fact that they're trying to force 1.5 million Palestinians out of their lands, right? Like, this is creating conversations that are normally not created. There was some talk in what is it, the Knesset, about potentially, you know, if the Egyptians didn't take the Palestinians, they would blow up one of the dams, you know, in Egypt. And there was literally, you know, one of the generals like, Israel misunderstands. If we wanted to be, if it pops off, we'll be in Tel Aviv in one day. Like, that's strong language. Like, the king of Jordan doesn't talk like that. Even Erdogan doesn't talk like that. Like, and it's easy to forget that Israel is a nation with a population of about 30 million. And Egypt is a nation, is it 130 million? I mean,
I think
Egypt
if there's
a huge country.
If there's anything we can glean from the last few weeks is that geopolitical social norms, geopolitical norms can change pretty quickly.
There's cracks. There's cracks all around, and we don't, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, Israel is taking its victory lap, talking about striking Iran, and it's like, you actually probably have problems closer to home. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you need to finish what's going on. And, you know, they've, you know, they're still carving up the West Bank. There's 1,000 new permits to build permanent housing for the Israelis. That happened within the last week. The Israelis have imprisoned more people in the West Bank than they've released. So once again, it's this constant cat and mouse game. They're never going to be called hostages. No, they're just people that got arrested by Israel. You see what I'm saying? Like, they keep playing these games. And, like, man, the word on the street is not always the word out of the country. And, like, these rumblings are starting to get big in lots of places. Lebanon looks like that's going to be popping off again very soon. Egypt is really becoming a bit of a wild card. It's something to watch, like, to see what happens. Because, again, this is a very powerful military. Like, this is not Sadat's Egyptian military. It's unfortunate that because they don't flex this power, people don't think about them, you know, in this developed way. I think you would need to consider Egypt's military at least as strong as Saddam's, you know. And though the United States are able to deal with a Saddam level army, that does not mean that Israel is. And once again, what they know of war is very different. They know about not attacking peer forces, even in Lebanon. That's not a peer force. The Lebanese army is not out there supporting the northern resistance. It's a different thing with people with tanks and fourth and fifth generation aircraft start bombing you. It is different. And you would think that they would spend more time trying to negotiate that relationship, because Egypt is more important than any other country directly related to Israel in that conflict. And this language of, we don't really care, just we'll force these Palestinians upon you, that's changing conversations. It's creating cracks in the infrastructure. And Iran is a problem that I still don't think Israel is a match for Iran, short of the United States being on full board and utilizing weapons that is going to change culture on the planet of the earth. To beat Iran, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to break the social contract. And who knows what happens when that happens. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki broke the social contract. It changed the definition of what you can get away with in war, what other people will accept. In many ways, Gaza has broken the social contract. But you can't treat Iran like Gaza. You couldn't treat Egypt like Gaza. Like, they can really fight back, and maybe better than you. It's fear of the United States that holds their hand, not fear of the Israelis. And there's only so many Americans to go around. Trump is doing what he can to pull them away from Europe, but they ain't there yet.
Yeah, no.
And this ain't something you can solve with mercenaries. There's not enough mercenaries for this kind of a war.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of spent mercenaries out there as well through a hot war, hot conflict in the Donbass. Let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We are available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can check out our Podbean. Let's give a shout out to our patrons. You guys can be patrons too, like, it's available. It's also free for those who don't have anything, but also want to be a part of our little community we got going on there. But let's give a shout out to our active patrons. History Will Absolve Me, Sophia San Marco, Kate Sauer, Monica Marciel, Laura Joelle, Nikki Infield, Nat the Rat, Lucy Newman, Samantha Guerrero, Dumpy, Tom LeBeau, True Crimes of the Empire, Dubsy 22, Jay Gallard 94, No Ground, RK, Paula Lapoderosa, Alyssa Piercy, Lauren Bullock, Suzette Tav, and Dennis Amadeus. Y'all the real heroes. Moja, thoughts before we slide out?
Man, I'm very, very curious to see what kind of deals can come from Saudi Arabia, and just to see what happens with Zelensky, who's going to go there after all the grown-ups go home,
Geopolitical realities will be shifting very soon. For Amoja, Lil Tanky Sumler, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.